What's good in the hood, YouTube? This is Crazy Samurai 71 here, bringing you guys another video. Today I'm bringing you guys a video on Lupinranger versus Patoranger, episode 33. This episode is called We Are the Youth Thief Brigade, and the episode overall was actually pretty good. We got to see some interesting stuff happen with the Lupinrangers, and this episode was done pretty well, even though it was pretty much a filler episode. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I thought it was decent, even though it had a sillier concept going in for it. But, you know, it's fine. So let's get started. The episode basically starts with us seeing that there is a ganglar attack occurring. This ganglar has the ability to turn people into children. And so what happens is that the Lupinrangers are fighting the ganglar, and at one point the ganglar uses his ability, which allows him to blast a beam of energy can turn a person into a child, well, an adult usually. And what happens is that the beams can like get past the person, and then they can come back around like homing missiles. And so that actually happens, and all three of the Lupinrangers are turned into children right then and there. At that point, though, we end up seeing that each one of them isn't necessarily the same age. One of them, Kairi is the youngest one that we see. Umika is the second youngest, and then Toma is the oldest of the three. So we actually see that the effects of the ray don't necessarily remain consistent. They're not all becoming the exact same age or same height or whatever. They're actually varied in that sense, which is kind of interesting. It worked fairly well, and it definitely creates a certain dynamic to the whole story. So we end up seeing that, which is interesting. What happens is that the Lupinrangers end up heading off because they have to like hide or whatever, so they try to get kid clothes so that they can disguise themselves and blend in so that no one sees them as Lupinrangers or anything like that. So they end up dressing up in regular kid clothes that, work with their colors that they're supposed to be wearing, which is fine. What we do end up seeing is that the Power Rangers arrive on the scene, and they try to, get involved after initially Noelle tries to get involved. But what happens is that, things aren't working out so well. And at one point, what happens is when the Lupinrangers return, it turns out that the versus changer of Umika was left behind because Umika forgot to grab hers when she was attacked by the monster. And so what happens is that at this point, the Power Rangers decide to bring it back to their base, but Noelle wants to confiscate it. But the thing is that the Power Rangers aren't that dumb, so they know that if he confiscates it, he'll give it back directly to the Lupinrangers. So what happens is that Kichiro wants to go off with Noelle to discuss things. There is a point earlier in the episode, I forgot to mention this, and I was trying to remember something that did happen. There was a point with the Power Rangers earlier in the episode where it's talking about how they don't really know the purposes of the Lupinrangers and what their mission is, and how Sequoia would love to work with them, but the thing is that they can't really trust them, and it wouldn't be received well under their reputation because of what they're aligned with and what their purposes are. And unless they know their real purposes, they can't just do that. And the thing is that Kichiro, on the other hand, does have an idea, but he doesn't go out of his way to tell the other two exactly what that purpose is. So that's something worth noting, and that's why actually he wants to meet with Noelle during this scene. So what happens is that Sequoia and Tsukasa are there. They're gonna head back to the base. What happens is that Kairi and all the others that are now children end up trying to, connect with Tsukasa and Sequoia to kind of, be brought along so that they could eventually get back the versus changer. So what happens is that they realize they also can't really contact Kogori that much. So that's something that's also worth noting. Even though they do manage to do something, but we don't actually get to see it. So keep that in mind. Now what does end up happening is that they end up being brought to the base, which when they're brought there, what happens is that they end up making up these fake names for themselves. Also what happens is that Tsukasa really loves them just for how cute they are, because they're like little kids and the things that they say and everything like that. You know, Tsukasa loves cute things, so that's the other thing that happens. And so that's very much so worth noting, especially the young Kairi. She just loves little Kairi. So it's kind of nice, it's kind of cute to see all that. And what happens is that they are trying to figure out who the parents are and all that, because that's obviously a big question, and they're trying to contact all around. So things aren't working super well. But in the meantime, what's happening is that they're doing all this, and then at one point, Toma, with his fake name or whatever, decides to go off and try to find the Versus Changer. What we do end up seeing is that Sequoia ends up bringing it into the base and gives it to Hilltop, and and Hilltop tries to. He says he has a meeting to go to, so he wants Agent Carter to deal with it. But Agent Carter's the one that's actually looking into finding out the location of the ganglar. But they just put it on a table, and what happens is that Toma eventually gets into the room, and when he arrives in the room, Agent Carter actually sees him. First, doesn't make much of a notice of him, but then immediately realizes, why is he in here? And they realize that apparently, he's one of the children that's been lost or whatever. So, he's on to him, but he's not looking at him too much. But then at one point, he's getting close to the Versus Changer when suddenly Hilltop arrives in the room, and he realizes that he can't just leave out a dangerous weapon like that, so he ends up locking it up in a special compartment in his office space. So he ends up going in there, opening up the compartment and then locking it so that the kids can't get to it. Now what does end up happening is that the other two are brought in by Sequoia to just hang out and be for now. And so that's something worth noting. What we do end up seeing at one point is that Kachiro and Noelle end up discussing things, because Kachiro wants to know about what the identity of the Lupin Rangers are, whether or not Noelle is actually the Red Ranger as well, the Lupin Red as well, or if he's like a copy or something else is happening, and also what is their true purpose and what will happen when all the Lupin collection items are combined together. Most of these questions he says he can't tell, and as far as what will happen, he says he doesn't really there's an idea, but they really don't know for sure what will happen. So it's something that's worth noting. And the thing is that Kachiro does care. It's obvious, but it's not very clear as to what that will lead to as of now. Though he does seem genuinely interested and more willing to be engaged and help out in some capacity. So that is something worth noting. What does end up happening is that the Lupin Rangers do end up discussing their plan to get back the Versus Changer, which in this case what happens is that Kairi decides to distract Sequoia with his cuteness by asking for her to help him make origami. And so she has these cute origami pre-cut things that they end up working on. Kairi ends up sitting on her lap, and then Sequoia tries to nuzzle into him, try to be sweet or whatever. So it's just this kind of oddness for Kairi, because Kairi's supposed to be it's just sort of awkward because they're typically not the most comfortable with each other, so it's this kind of weirdness, but it's fine. In the meantime, what we do end up seeing is that Toma and Umika end up playing a little game of hide and seek. What happens is that Toma is counting, and the thing is that Umika decides to hide behind where the Versus Changer is, and she still has her Versus vehicle, so she actually uses it to open up the the compartment, since it's locked, similar to how she opens up normal safes. So she does this, and she manages to fairly quickly get the Versus Changer out. At this point, what happens is that she ends up running off. Sequoia ends up noticing her and mentions, "Oh, the kids got the Versus Changer. We have to go after them." So at that point, Sequoia ends up running after them. Tsukasa is staying with Kairi at the moment, and what happens is that Umika is being chased. She ends up having to duck under some people and just trying to dodge out of the way. At one point, what happens is that she ends up dropping the Versus Changer. At that point, Toma manages to get it after kneeing Sequoia in the balls. Down there, basically. So at that point, what happens is that from this point on, we end up seeing that they end up heading off into the front part of the building, and they want the Versus Changer, but then suddenly we see Kyrie as a full-grown adult show up, and he ends up getting the Versus Changer, which is interesting because we also see that young Kyrie's still there, so it's sort of like, wait, how is that possible, you would think. And then what happens is that following this, Sequoia and Tsukasa end up getting an alert from Agent Carter that basically says they have to go help out because what happens is that Noelle and Kichiro are now facing off against the ganglar, the one that's known as Envy. So what happens is they have to deal with this ganglar, and they help out in the scene, and then what happens is that the mother of the children shows up, which the mother actually ends up being this this version of Tsukasa as a mother that ends up taking them. So it's just this weird situation. It confuses Agent Carter, but it works. And so they manage to get home to their mother, which looks exactly like Tsukasa, which is kind of fitting just based off of the scenario and all that other stuff. But yeah. So then what happens is that we end up seeing that the Patorangers end up facing off against the ganglar. We do end up seeing them at one, like we do see them fight against the ganglar, and oh, that's right. There is a point where I'm trying to remember how this works. I believe is either the Lupinrangers or Noelle, I believe it is the one that actually gets the Lupin Collection piece. I believe he's the one that does it. So he managed to get the Lupin Collection piece, which is based off of the Turbo Ranger Morpher, which is like the 2-piece Morpher that they had. And the thing is that they do manage to defeat the ganglar. They manage to use Patoran, Ugo, and Pat Kaiser. Patoran X's finisher together to destroy the ganglar. The ganglar is then turned big after the Lupinrangers are turned back to their normal ages. And what happens is that the Patorangers end up forming Pat Kaiser. But first they actually get the X trains that Noelle has, so they actually get to use the X trains with Pat Kaiser to form Pat Kaiser trains, and so we get to see that combination used again, which is cool. And they also get to fight alongside eventually X Emperor, because the trains return back to X Emperor. And then what happens is that Pat Kaiser transforms into Pat Kaiser Strong Biker, so we end up seeing that combination and X Emperor Gunner used for the finisher to destroy the ganglar. And so, things are good in that sense. We end up seeing that the Power Rangers return back to their base. They're grateful that they managed to accomplish their mission. And what happens is that unfortunately they were not able to get back the Versus Changer, but they were able to return the kid to their mother, which they were grateful at least to have accomplished that. So that was something that was worth noting. And what happens is that Noelle offers to treat the Patorangers to a meal at Juror, the cafe that the Lupinrangers work at, because they'll probably treat them nicely or whatever. That's what they say, at least. And so what happens is that that's what they plan on doing, and they're a little surprised by his offer, but anyway, they're still willing to do it. In the meantime, what we end up seeing with the Lupinrangers is that it turns out the one that was disguised as Kyrie and also the mother of the children was actually Kagori in disguise. So he was able to quickly disguise himself in both instances and basically help them out. Which again, he's a master of disguise in a lot of ways, and that's why he's been able to actually help them before. And it's a big difference in what they're able to accomplish because of his abilities there. So that is something worth noting. And we actually get to see Kagori with like a woman's wig, which was just sort of funny to watch. Overall, it was a good episode. It had some pretty decent moments. It could have been more than it was, but at the same time, I think what they did was perfectly fine. The preview looks to be a pretty good one because, like, based on the preview for episode 34, it looks pretty good. It's going to introduce the Lupin Magnum, which will be a very important weapon in the show later down the line. Like, hopefully in the next few episodes, it will start to gain its real importance because that should unlock a special mode for the Lupinrangers, which we'll get to see soon, and also for Patoranger. Actually, I think it's Lupin X, which we'll see soon enough. What this could lead to, and people are still suspecting this might be a possibility, is that eventually, because of how Kichiro's acting now, he may eventually join sides with the Lupinrangers. But again, we don't know for a fact, and based on these current situations, it is more and more so looking like a greater possibility of it potentially happening. I do want to see what they're going to do, whether or not that will occur. And again, I don't know for a fact, but there's enough going right now that it could totally happen, and I'm looking forward to seeing whether or not it actually will. And the trailer does also show little clips regarding Arson Lupin and some new ganglars and some other stuff happening. So that should all look very interesting to see, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing the Lupin Magnum used, because the Lupin Magnum will become a pretty standard weapon used by Kairi, I believe. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing how its functionality will work. And I'm curious if there's any functionality between it and also the Versus Changer, and whether or not that's how it will activate that special mode or not, or if there's some other piece that they're missing, or something else that will trigger it. Again, we don't really know for a fact, but I'm definitely looking forward to seeing how the Lupin Magnum works. Again, I remember hearing about the Lupin Magnum months ago now, but it's been so long now that I don't remember the exact details on how it's supposed to function in that way, but I've heard that it's supposed to do something regarding like the super modes for Lupin X and for Lupin Red. So just keep that in mind. Otherwise, that's about it for me, guys. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe. I'd love to know your guys' opinions about this episode, and are you looking forward to the next one? So until then, guys, I'm Crazy Samurai 1, and goodbye, guys.